Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. It's an overview of the DM32 and some of the amazing features that it has, so we appreciate your time today. Thanks for you that are chiming in, confirming that you all, I know Jay can, so hopefully you can see me too and hear me. So again, we appreciate your time. So there's a lot of stuff that I can't do individual slides for, but I do have a laundry list of some amazing stuff. So let's kind of dig in here and go through some of these amazing features. So this great animation was made for us by our partners in training at Community Housing Partners out in Virginia. So we do strive for, and if anybody's looking for a partnership in terms of training and solutions, reach out to Jay, because that's something we've been trying to promote and include in how we've been able to market and help ourselves and other trainers. I do have a CEU thing about BPI stuff coming up. Colin Genge may pop in on the background, but that's Jay on the left and it's me on the right. There's our email addresses if you want to follow up with any kind of specific question that may not be pertinent today. Okay, so over on your control panel, you can see that you have some handouts. So there's some handouts here about the DM32 specifically. So there's a quick guide, there's the manual, and a variety of other stuff. And normally we don't do many polls, but there's a few that can help us with this. So it would help me a lot to, when I talk to my audiences, to find out what kind of gauge do you have. So you may use or have several. You're allowed to pick more than one. So we also kind of separate for those who are using the DM32 with the speed control adapter using an energy conservatory fan. So we always found that there's more and more of those every time we do a webinar. So we do have a lot of who are using the DM32 and not far behind on the DG700. So, and we do have a few that are using the speed control adapter. So if you are using the speed control adapter, which allows you to use energy conservatory fans, if you could chime in with Jay in the background and just let us know how that's working for you, and we appreciate your participation. All right, let's do one more. This doesn't pertain to blower door testing, but let's just call it testing. So we used probably a previous poll. So how long have you been in this? And kind of gives us an idea about what the our skill level is for some of our listeners. So again, let's crank through this real quick and get it out of the way. Everybody's chiming in. I appreciate that a lot. Clearly, there's a bunch of folks who have a lot of experience here. So some of the stuff may be stuff you're very familiar with. I know a lot of folks tune in regularly to webinars, even though they've actually were familiar with how to use this stuff. So here's one thing that is out there, but it's changing. Okay, so I have some things that go with it. So you can trade in your DM2 or your DG700 and get a brand new DM32 smart gauge. But the exchange has changed. So if you have a DM2, and make sure you note that your exchange program ends on December 15th. So you have until December 15th to trade in your DM2 for a phenomenal price to upgrade to the DM32 smart gauge. For those of you who have a DG700 and are looking to move up to a really much more advanced and sophisticated type of gauge that's user-friendly, they've actually altered that exchange to include Wi-Fi and the TC adapter. It's all one price. So definitely something you want to reach out to sales at retrotec.com or call the number on the bottom of the slides here, and something you want to follow up on. You can also reach out to Jay in the background if you want more information about that. So this is the future of the building analysts, which was a BPI ad that I tried to alter and make sure included both manufacturers. So that's the Minneapolis blower door on the left and the the DM32 in the Tron's guy's hands. So I think that when we reach the Tron level, we'll be at a whole nother level of actually testing our buildings. So yeah. So this is the DM32 smart gauge, smartest gauge on the market. We appreciate your time, and let's dig into some details. So today, I have 3 slides that deal with what we're going to do today. So many people aren't aware that the DM32 has been in the field for 3 years, and it took them probably 3 years just to develop, and it was a painstaking challenge to come up with something that's new and innovative like this. So other people always want to follow and try and make stuff that's better, but you're always trying to compete with what's been out on the market already. So this has been very well field tested, and thousands of these are actually out in the market right now. You can get Wi-Fi built in, but you don't have to. And so other people refer to this as kind of a gimmick, but it's not. And here's why. Because you may need a second gauge, and you don't need Wi-Fi. You're just going to use it for diagnostics around the house. Well, you can actually save $300 on the price of a gauge by not getting Wi-Fi. So you can get a gauge for a whole lot less, and if you need it later, you can always add it. So we felt it was a better solution for the market, for those who want another gauge, but may not have need that as a feature. So many of you understand that there's a touch screen, but the one that DM32 has, it's pressure sensitive, so it's not like your phone. But this means you can use gloves. So if it's cold weather, we now have commercial duct testers, so a lot of those folks are out in the exposed area or they're wearing gloves. You can actually use the gauge with gloves on, without special gloves for the type of interface on the gauge. Some of this stuff will be covered as we go, and Claudia, I'm sure you're probably reading along as we go. So there's a few things that are on here, but here's another page. So these are all the things that we kind of like brainstormed quickly about what we consider to be why this is such an amazing gauge that's out in the market today. So we don't require any adapters to connect the gauge to other devices, other computers. It's designed to be Ethernet and USB capable, already built in. There's a variety of stuff that's on here, which I do have a few slides that will cover this. We display the fan speed as a percentage. That's very helpful for those who want to do set speed versus set pressure. We do have some stuff on the field check that's been updated recently. Firmware, if you're not keeping up with your firmware, then you definitely need to be on top of that. Calibration every 5 years seems to be something that the industry feels is one of the best features that the gauge has. And I already mentioned the trade-in program, and I'm sure there's more things. So if you find there's some information out there that you thought was a great feature in the gauge, all right, so this is the perfect time to add this. So what is the best feature of the DM32 or any gauge? So if you got something that's like, wow, I wish gauges did this, let us know in the comment area, like, wow, I wish your gauge did this, or I wish somebody's gauge did that. So, so these are some of the things that Jay put together as just some basic stuff. So the one that's the fourth one is that there's actually a calibration procedure. That's an ILAC certification that Retrotec's calibration chamber has gone through. And this is something that may be required for people who are doing large building tests, certain commercial duct testing, a variety of other compliance paths require that your gauge and your fan follow this type of certification. So we'll see if we got anybody. We got 53. Give me a few more votes here. We can call it a day here. So a couple more chime in. All right, thank you. And we'll see. There you go. A few more. All right, I tried to do less than a minute, so let's close this one out, and we'll see what people think are great features. And don't hesitate to throw something in the questions. Works with any fan, and results live in the gauge. Those are two things that have been a primary resource for me. So we'll hide that. The one thing that was appealing to me when I came to work with Retrotec stuff, in fact, I was a trainer, and I had both. I had 2 or 3 Retrotec systems, 2 or 3 Minneapolis systems. But the one thing that I thought was just the most exciting thing is to see my results live in the gauge, especially air changes per hour. Georgia was doing code compliance before anybody, and I could go to a house and I could determine instantly if they were passing air changes per hour as I walked around the house and made sure everything was all sealed up. Okay, let's see what else we got here. This is kind of a historical perspective that Colin Genge has been designing. You call them gauges, but these were actually like, at the time, super high-tech, sophisticated measurement devices. That you can see that I have on the right here, I have my 3 Magna-Helic gauges that are all controlled by various knobs to turn things on or off. Notice below here that I have a little computer and a printer. These are like the same kind of printers you have for the mobile card machines. So I could go to a job site, this is probably early 90s, do an automated test for the most part, enter my data, and have a printout right there on site. And that was way beyond what anybody had dreamed of at the time. So Colin's goal was to reduce these into a smaller and smaller device. So the historical perspective was that as the things went along, they got more user-friendly. They did get a little smaller, until finally around 2006 you can see that he ended up with a computer screen and a keyboard all in one in the DM2, and then they jumped ahead to something that was more user-friendly, kind of like your phone. That's why it's called a smart gauge in 2013. So it's an amazing progression. It no longer has a printer built in, but it does allow you to work with other apps that can give you instant results. Okay, I'm not sure why that was there, but we'll move past it. So these are things that are included that to me always, again, were something that I felt were just easy to use, easy to read, a pictorial quick guide that I can actually look at something, see the information, and a nice picture. I could literally, if I was in a frantic when I first started learning, I could grab this thing and find the results and look at a picture and go, oh yeah, this is my problem. I didn't do this, or this is what I need to do to get those results. Of course, it comes in a nice custom case that holds your umbilical for your fan, and it's got magnets, so you can see that it's stuck on the little plate that comes with the unit. Everything is really well thought in terms of how the user is going to use all of the stuff that happens here, whether it's the guide or it is the case. So if you have not actually felt the DM32 in your hand, it's phenomenal. It really was just designed for the user. It's got a clip that fits on your side if you want to go around as you're doing certain things, or just clip it on while I set up my CAS test. It's got super rare earth magnets, so I can stick it to anything metal, specifically the hot water tank when I'm doing my combustion appliance tests. All these things are now more of inherent features that we're going to see in gauges in the future. So you can also use this with one hand. Like I can actually grab the gauge and use my thumb to actually enter some of the tap the buttons to change results or change actually the fan or the ranges. This is unique to Retrotec, and not only is it color-coded, which makes it air resistant, because idiot-proof is a poor word, because for some reason, you know, there seems to be better and better idiots out there. So we all make mistakes, so we're all becoming better and better idiots. But the goal is that if you could reduce the errors that happen in the field, everybody wins. So it doesn't really dummy things down as much as prevent accidental connections that shouldn't be there. So not only are they color-coded with the gauge and the fan, but they also are tapered. You can see here that the tubing goes right around here, so it touches on the outside and on the inside, and it doesn't distort your tubing as you take it on or off. So those have been, they changed those probably about maybe 5 years ago or something, and they're also on the fans, and it's definitely a much better air connection. So here's our air-resistant process that goes along with the yellow fan, whether it's a duct tester or a blower door. They're all yellow, so that's always where the yellow tube goes, and of course the ports are color-coded, but the concept is everybody has a way of memorizing it. So for energy conservatory, maybe green to the grass. Here it's yellow tube always goes to the yellow fan. That means if you're using an energy conservatory fan, you need to remember yellow goes to the fan, because their fans are yellow. So the difference is on channel B, Energy Conservatory uses the input of the top right channel to connect to its fans. And Retrotec does the opposite. They use the reference. And I can explain later about why that kind of is. Same with the blower door. Again, yellow port goes to the yellow fan. Red always goes through the red cloth. So one of the things that makes this gauge smarter than the average gauge is that if I'm going to do a pressurization test, right, which means that I'm going to be on the inside of the house, I've turned my fan around and I'm now pressurizing, then I do not need to add any additional tubing, right? So this also could be the same concept if I was outside. Like I could be outside and pressurizing or even depressurizing, right? That the gauge knows which way the fan is moving. So I always connect my red tube. Red tube always goes through the red cloth. All right, that's always the way to remember how to set this up. And here's what's happening here. So when I depressurize, all right, on channel B we usually get CFM results, but those are based upon a pressure, and you can actually change the settings on the gauge to read pressure. So if I was reading pressure, I would read minus 50 pascals on the top, and channel B would be reading 102 pascals, right? But if I was going to pressurize, right, then what I would actually be getting is these results. So now I'm at 50 pascals, not negative 50, and my pressure on the bottom, because I'm now adding more pressure to the inside of the house, would be reading 152 pascals, right? This is why the GT700 requires you to add another tube to reference the outside, right? And that's actually how that gets set up. So this is what the gauge does. It determines if the flow is toward or away from the gauge. So it actually is always determining if my flow is toward or away. So when I'm pressurizing with the DM32, it will actually subtract channel B from channel A and give me my results, right? So this is why this is considered a smart gauge. Besides some of the other stuff, these are the things that are built into this gauge, and also the DM2 has this same kind of feature. So it's been inherent in the way that Retrotec has designed their gauges, again, to be more user-friendly, air-resistant, not knowing when do I add an extra tube or where and when. They actually just have to take care of that. So the only thing you need to keep track of is you do not need any additional tubing when you pressurize, or if you're outside, all right? So the red tube always goes through the red cloth. And think of it that it's not where you're standing, but it's where the gauge is located. So the gauge is on the inside, red tube goes through the red cloth. Gauge is on the outside for some reason you're doing a test like that, then this is very common if you're doing multifamily. So I may be pressurizing or depressurizing. Again, red tube goes through the red cloth. Battery. A lot of questions about the battery. The battery is built in. You can see on the left kind of what it looks like if I put one on top of the gauge. I've actually done a test, like ran a test for 8 hours and recorded it on video, so you can see how long it really took the battery to die. So 6 to 8 hours is an average for that. But here's some of the things you can do. Is you can always plug the gauge in, even if you're driving from one job to the other. It's a basic USB port, so I can charge it anytime, anywhere, at home, on the road. But the new fans, the new 5,000 fans and 6,000 fans, they actually now have a port on the side that allows you to charge your gauge if for some reason you get to the job site and you're like, we haven't used it in 3 weeks and somebody left it dead. So you can actually plug it in and run it with the USB plugged in. You can use it as a power or charging port. But here I can actually run the gauge by just connecting it to the side of the fan. So these are kind of things that, again, make things user-friendly and make people more productive. Some of the connections that are on the bottom, right? So the top is actually where I connect to the fan itself, but on the bottom I actually have an Ethernet and a USB. So the USB can be used for charging or for connectivity. So if I want to connect it to a computer, which I need to do when I do firmware update, or if I'm going to connect it to a software that I need, if I want to run it, I can run it off of a USB connection or Ethernet. The difference is that you're kind of limited to about 75 feet kind of for USB, and that's kind of pushing it. But Ethernet is really limitless because you can always add more power hubs to the line, and if I could have a gauge on the first floor, and I could have a fan on the top of a 20-story building, and be able to control that with my unlimited links of Ethernet. So, or read what the gauge is doing. So commonly I would have the fan and the gauge on the 30th floor. My software connects to the bottom. I'm on the first floor, and I can automatically control the gauge through the different softwares that Retrotec has to do automated testing, or to just actually read the gauge directly with the virtual gauge. Again, as I mentioned, that the DM32 does control TEC fans. So what you see here on the bottom of the gauge is actually a speed control adapter. There it is. So what it does is it converts the signal from the Retrotec signal with its fans into a different signal that works with the Energy Conservatory fans. So most of the ways you use the Retrotec fans is with the cruise control concept. There is a knob on the side of the fan, just to make sure we're all on the same page, that the duct tester and the blower door actually have a speed control on the fan themselves. So if I, for some reason, couldn't connect my gauge through it, somebody stepped on the Ethernet and it died, I can still run the fan by just using the knob on the side and read the pressures that run through the gauge. It's normally how we do the Energy Conservatory stuff. But most people just hit set pressure and run the Retrotec stuff automatically, because it will go to your set pressure and try to do everything it can to maintain that, whether it needs to fluctuate up or down. So this adapter allows me to use the cruise control that's built into the Retrotec system very intuitive with the Energy Conservatory duct tester, duct blaster. You can see on the side there. You can also use it for the exhaust fan flow meter and the true flow grid, but I don't need an adapter to do that. I can actually just use the gauge to work with the exhaust fan or true flow grid. So I'm going to cover some things that are, I don't need Wi-Fi to do a lot of the stuff that the gauge does. It was more talking about what is inherent, that you can get it with Wi-Fi, but it does all this stuff with or without Wi-Fi. So these are some of the things that I'm going to cover briefly. But test at any pressure is one that I don't have a slide on, but if for some reason you needed to test at 32 pascals, you can do that. I can hit set pressure 32, and I can do that. The only time that may become a concern if for some reason somebody did a previous test and couldn't reach their test pressure and they didn't use the add feature. So like, I can only get to 30 pascals, and they didn't extrapolate at the add feature. I mean, I could go back and actually test again at 30 pascals. Down here is channel A is upper area where I see 0.0. Channel B is just below it. And my results that are being displayed are just below that. So here I have CF square feet. You can see on the left that I'm using a duct tester, and the range is the 200 duct tester, the DU200, and the range is the mid-range. So I have the device above the image, and below it I have the range. Below this it's telling me the area that I'm going to do my duct tester to, so I'm going to get my results directly in the gauge based upon this area. And I can just tap the area if I wanted to change that. I have a slide on that later. And some of the other features are going to be included. Running a test, you can see several things have slightly changed. So channel A now tells me the test pressure that I'm at. So I'm doing a duct tester and I'm pressurizing. And I can also tap channel A and use the hold feature. Channel B gives me my results, and again, these are live during the test. And I can also use the CFM per 100 square feet with the add feature already built in. So these are most people refer to this as the mode, if you're familiar with the DG700 language. These are really just the results, so that's what we refer to them as. So on the left, I can see my device and my range. Just above that, I have my time average and the set speed, so I can see how much the fan might be struggling. Most of us use our ears to know that, wow, this fan is really struggling to reach this pressure. I need to change the range, or it's so low I don't even know it's on. I need to change the range. But here I can actually see up in the top corner that I'm only at 3%, and I really should change the range because I'm not getting the result. Change or change the device, it's just a matter of actually tapping literally on the image itself. So I tap on the image and say, oh, I'm going to go from the one range, and I tap again to the mid. So I go from the mid-range to the mid-range. So I didn't really change it on there, but that's how you change the ranges. I needed to go from low, I can just tap on it. If I'm going to do a blower door test after I do my duct test, I'm literally just going to open up the same area because I'm going to change the device. I select change device at the bottom. It opens up a various settings. This actually has updated to now have blower doors and duct testers separate. So some of these have already been combined. So the firmware is updated, even though my slides have not yet. So I can check the 1000, and you must instantly select a range. It doesn't allow you to get past this stage. So if I hit cancel, it'll just keep whatever I had set previously. So if I'm going to set to the B range, now I'm ready to go with the blower door test on range B. And I can change my results by tapping on this. I have other slides to show that. But sometimes you do a blower door with CFM per 100 square feet. California or other conditions may provide for this kind of requirement. So the results are not specific to the actual device. You can actually intertwine them as needed. So navigating, the arrow takes you back to the home screen or the previous screen, and the three little dots navigates to the next page. So these are some of the different results that are on here. So you can change your results. We've kind of mentioned some of those. So let's go through the scenario if I'm using a duct test. So normally I usually will start with CFM. I need to write down CFM in terms of using my documentation, but I want to know the results at CFM per 100 square feet. So I tap on channel B, and it opens up various results to be displayed. And I can pick the CFM per 100 square feet, and this is where some people kind of get lost or confused. If I tap it again, it starts changing the units. So now I went from meters cubed to hours per meter squared. So there's a variety of different metric or US standards that are on here. So depending on which one you're after, you just keep toggling through, and you'll come back to the beginning, and be careful you don't pick 1000 versus the 100. And whatever one is live on your screen is what you're going to get when you go back to the home spot. I can hit the arrow back, or I can press the home button briefly. It takes me back to the home, and now I have CFM per 100 square feet on channel B. And this is based upon an area. I mentioned that earlier. So if I need to change my area, I can tap on the 100 square feet. And this also happens while I'm live. So I can go through the scenario of tapping on it, go through the settings, and I can actually change that. But if I'm running a test, I can actually see what is actually being displayed on the bottom. So if I need to change that, like, oh, I'm actually at 1,500 square feet, I can tap on the settings or the area, and they bring up a display on the right. So I tap on the area, and I can alter that, and it takes me back to the home page. And whatever my square footage is that I need for the duct test or even a blower door test, I can be entered. One of the ones that's built into this is the set pressure, which is very common. That's the cruise concept. The other one is set speed. So many of the users out there are familiar with set pressure because it's common. You do set pressure 50 or 25, and it automatically knows if you're pressurizing or depressurizing based on how the tubing is set up. But the other option you also have is also set speed. So what set speed does is actually it's very similar to the knob that's on the side of the fan. So instead of using the knob, I can now just use the gauge to set a percentage of the fan speed. So 100% is the fan doing full speed, 100% all the time, and 1% is barely on at all. The reason that you may want to use your gauge to do this is that I can go up and down with 1% increments versus trying to do the knob up and down, which is a little more time-consuming and a little more challenging to tweak your actual control of the fan. So I hit set speed, and it brings up a display. I enter the percentage. One of the ways to know what my best percentage would be is I normally would do set pressure 50, and then I would watch and see what my pressure was in the upper left of the gauge. So if I knew that it was 44% to have gotten to that stage, then I can actually do this. The difference between why you may want to use set speed over set pressure is if you're doing air sealing that's live in the house and you want to actually keep a pressure going in the house. So we know you don't need to have 50 pascals to do air sealing, but one of the things you may want to do is go around the house and people may be opening and closing doors, or you're actually opening and closing things to seal them off, maybe to get in and out of the attic. So what happens when I'm on set speed is that when the pressure changes in the house, right, it doesn't want to ramp up to try and accommodate that change of pressure. So when the doors open, it says, wow, I have a whole nother hole here. I've got to ramp up my pressure to accommodate that. And when the hole closes, when the door closes, it says, oh, I don't have as much resistance, and makes a major pressure on the fan, which can also sometimes cause the fan to fall right out of the door. So set speed does not actually alter any conditions when you're opening or closing the doors in the house. Clearly your results will change, but it doesn't actually cause the fan to ramp up or ramp down. The fan's going to kind of stay at a consistent pressure speed to do that. So here I can ramp up and ramp down by 1%, which is a lot easier than using the speed control on the fan itself. So one of the other features that's very valuable, which I can't really display in the fan here, in the slides here, but I can explain it. So you tap on channel A, and it will hold your readings, and it holds the readings in channel A and in channel B. While it's on hold, and usually you see a thing at the top says flashing hold, then I can actually go down and change my settings. So if I want to go see what the CFM is, I can do that, and I can change any of the units. I can change any of the results, all while this number is being held in the gauge. So I can even turn the fan off right now, knowing that whatever is in the gauge on the top is being held while I make the adjustments on the bottom and write down my results. So if I needed CFM, I could do that, and if I needed air changes per hour at or CFM per 100 square feet, I can obviously do that. And then once I release hold, everything goes back to the newest readings. So of course it does baseline, but you can also do various things with the baseline. One of which is I can do, basically I can hit start, stop. I can also do a variety of stuff with time averaging. So again, all these things are built in, but I can see on the display what my baseline is, and knowing that I have one, or if knowing that if there's no display here, that I do not have a baseline. So that's the difference on one of the reasons why I feel these are powerful tools to let me know whether or not I have it and when I need to eliminate it. So again, this is one of the things that drew me to Retrotec, is that I could get my results live during my test. So if I'm going to do a duct leakage, so I clearly have blower door and duct leakage combined in here, so I must have combined my slides by accident. So we're just going to call this a duct test, even though it says blower door compliance test. So at the top here, on the side here, I normally get my results that say 107 CFM, and I divide that by the square footage that this duct system serves, and I can get my percentage live. So I can get 4.58 CFM per 100 square feet live in the gauge as I'm doing it. I can also do the same with air changes per hour. So air changes per hour will also give me a volume that I can alter, and if I'm doing the test, I can see at the bottom what I'm actually testing and what my results are, that it's giving me this 2.78 air changes per hour. Of course, it has an add feature. We're all familiar with this concept of turning the gauge on and off. Just to make sure, those of you that are, I struggled for a while understanding what the heck was the add feature and what it did. So on the left, I'm only at 45 pascals, and my add feature is off, and these are my results, 2798. When you turn on the add feature, it will extrapolate what your test pressure is. Right? Notice I'm still at 45 pascals, but it will give me my results as though I'm at 50. So this is really valuable. In fact, I just turn it on as a habit, because sometimes, especially for a blower door, my results go from 47 to 52, and they kind of can fluctuate depending on the house or the structure, or things that are conditions from outside. So to avoid that, the add feature will help compensate and give you your results at your test pressure. So as I mentioned earlier, this is actually something that is a not just a time saver, but it's just also air resistant. That every time I turn on the gauge, it will keep my last settings. So if I did a blower door test in the previous house, I go to the next house, and boom, the exact same blower door configuration shows up. Things you want to make sure you keep track of is that your range is changed, or if you are going to use any kind of extrapolation like air changes per hour or CFM per 100 square feet, I need to change the volume or the area that goes along with it. So basically I can confirm my settings. I usually try and tell people if you're used to the gauge or not, or you're sharing the gauge, that something may have been tapped as you shut it down. Just make sure you're on pascals on channel A, CFM is your results you're looking for, and your device and your range are all set up. And if so, then you're good to go. It's a matter of just hitting set pressure, entering the pressure you want to go to. So we're really going to do a duct test here. Some people may do a blower door, start at 25, but based on my device, I know instantly I have a duct tester, and probably going to do a duct test. Again, you can use a duct tester for a blower door, especially for passive house or other smaller units. And I can get my results instantly with the add feature at CFM right there. So it only takes a matter of seconds really to turn it on and move through the fan to get your results. Notice that I can actually increase or decrease my pressure also through the gauge with the arrows that go up and down. So if you wanted to start at 25 for blower door and then jog your way up by increments of 5, I can now increase the pressure that it's achieving, or I can just hit stop and reset for 50. So one of the other things that it also has is multiple languages. So I have Spanish, Dutch, French that are built into the gauge. There's also German and Portuguese, I believe, and a variety of other ones that can be requested when you get the gauge. So when things are shipped overseas, they clearly will put in German for the ones that go over there. So if you are looking for a different language that's built in, you can reach out to Retrotec, and they can either help you with the firmware or if you're going to buy one that you need a different language than these, then you can actually have it set up there. Okay, so I thought I would explain the time average, because time average is quite different between a Retrotec gauge or the Energy Conservatory gauges. That what happens in for the Retrotec is that it's a running time average, which means that it's always capturing the last, like for here I have 30 seconds. So I gave it a long time average to explain why the time average is something you want to make sure you at least wait once for that same amount of time before you gather your results, but we recommend really twice. Right? Most people use probably a 10-second average and it goes really quick, but the example works better with a 30-second average. Right? So if you notice that my ramp time up here, the blue dots are showing me the time of 10, 20, 30, 40 seconds across the bottom, and my CFM is up on the left-hand side. So as I start the fan, you can see that my first amount of time, there's actually periods where I don't actually have the stable pressure, but it could be averaging this these results into what I consider to be my live results that I'm seeing. So that's why we want to make sure that we're getting live results that are at our test pressure, knowing that I'm able to know that my average is not being altered by the initial ramp up time. All right, hopefully that was not as confusing as it sounded like to me. Okay, so you can see here that between the this one section of the 30-second average, that I actually am averaging between 600 and 1,000 with my results. All right, so that's why we recommend that you really try and wait at least the amount of time your time average is times 2. So if I go to the next period, now you can see that my results are clearly showing that I have a stable reading and I'm averaging all based on the test pressure that I have. So the time average is based on the top, and to change that you actually go under settings and time average, and these are my options that I have. So I can do 1 second, 5, 10, 30. There's also a manual which will go up to 2 minutes. For some reason you want to do a much longer time average, you can set that for 120 seconds. So now let's go back and you can kind of see this as it goes through as a live scenario. So I'm doing my test, and these are my test results as they go across. This kind of looks like the rCloud app, actually. So for those of you that are looking at that, you can see what this kind of looks like live. All right, and then I can actually watch my time averages as it goes across. So normally we would be reading our results while it was still on, right? So somewhere in here I'm reading my results, but I definitely want to make sure I'm in this range between the two sections here, and then we stop the fan. So you can watch your device. If you do this, if you're on 30 seconds, it takes a while for it to actually get back to 0, because it keeps averaging these 30 seconds intervals until it finally gets down to 0. So the other difference is that it, oh sorry, let me go back. This is the difference between what the Energy Conservatory does, which it will capture 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, all right? And this is more of a running average that you would kind of see. So it's gathering the last 30 seconds. So even though you set it for a 30-second time average, it's constantly changing on you, because it gives you the last 30 seconds as it goes. Oh, this is supposed to be dropped. We already did this. Sorry. So it also will use Energy Conservatory exhaust fan flow meter. It also does a true flow grid. This is the most common one that's out there in terms of people using, and also the most common accidental connection. So the Energy Conservatory uses the input for their devices, their fans, and their exhaust fan flow meter. So again, for the Retrotec, they use yellow for all of their devices. Right? So if you're going to use exhaust fan flow meter, you connect it to the reference on channel B. I do recommend that you combine ports on channel A and B. There's a whole bunch of webinars that cover that specifically. One of the coolest features that is built into this gauge, which can help people when you have an exhaust fan that's too large for the exhaust fan flow meter, or you're doing some kind of range hood that clearly there's no way to actually measure this. You can use a flow hood, but sometimes they won't actually fit below the range hood, even if it's out in the middle of an island. So what you can do is, this is actually in the gauge, and it shows up as a device. So if after I go from duct testers, the blower door, TC equipment, and on the last page is this whole flow. So it actually is kind of a device that's built into the gauge and allows me to create my own flow device. So what I can do is get a cardboard box. You're really looking for something that has some decent depth on it. 6, 8, 10 inches is a lot better. And you're going to cut an opening across the bottom. The image that I have probably should have a little larger opening. I would recommend something that's between 3 to 5 inches. You can always make it larger, maybe 4 to 6 inches. Somewhere in that range gives you a good flow through the device. And then I'm going to connect my gauge, and here you can see that I connected channel A in the blue and channel B in the yellow. And what this does is allows me to monitor the pressure that runs through and also get my results at the same time. So you can use this for exhaust fans. You cannot use it for supply, right? And what's inside of the end of this blue tube is actually a static pressure port, or sometimes I'll take the tubing and run it around the 4 corners of the box with little small little T's that go on the side, so I can actually get an average of the pressure inside, or I make sure that my static pressure probe is not in the flow. Wherever I'm reading the end here on the box cannot be determined or have any effect from the turbulence that moves through the box itself. So it definitely needs to be off to the side, and again, all 4 corners is a great way to do it, or at least have a nice static pressure probe that is not being affected by the flow. So any questions about what we talked about? So some of this may be familiar because you own the gauge, but you may not realize all the stuff that it does and just how sophisticated this little device is. So if there's something that you are wanting to know if it does or doesn't do, then don't hesitate to ask any questions. Okay, so one of the things that this is an app, so there's several things that apps do to make the gauge better and smarter. And I highly encourage you to check out rCloud. You can go to Retrotec homepage and see rCloud being right there, and click on that, because I feel this is going to be one of the greatest things that will make our lives better. Because what it allows you to do is open up your phone or a tablet, because all of those have the ability to do Wi-Fi, and connect directly to your gauge and run the test that you're looking to do automatically. No matter where you're at, if you have a device that's like a phone, it will always geolocate your location. So, for instance, if I have Wi-Fi, no matter what, I can always run my test automatically. I don't need anything else to do this. Use rCloud. That's why it's such a basic and amazing app that it does. And I can document that this test was done exactly as the standard was for that test, whether it's ResNet, California, Tower 24, or if it's for ICC code. These are all built into the rCloud to perform these types of tests automatically. But if I do have a device that has internet, then I can also use the benefits of that. So it may be my phone. Some tablets are LTE or 4G enabled, so it allows me to communicate back at the rCloud itself to update my account and upload my test when I'm done. But if I didn't have the internet, it's still not the end of the world. But if you do have a device that is LTE capable, it will almost always geolocate where you're at. So when we're out traveling with our phones and we're using maps, it's always able to geolocate where you're at. In fact, it may notify you that you've lost it when you're in a tunnel, but in general, you always have GPS. But what makes the internet makes your map so much more successful is because if you're driving down the road, it will always make sure you're on the road. So if anybody can remember when we first used this technology, sometimes you would not be on the road as you drove down the road on your map. So the two things together, the internet and the GPS, make sure that they are bridging the connections in your device. So you're always driving on the highway, not down the wrong side of the road. But if you do not have internet, I can still use GPS to locate where I did my test. So it'll provide a lat-long or latitude place that I can put on a map and be like, here's where I was when I did my test. Right? So if I do not have LTE or internet connection, I can still determine where I was if my device had that type of connection. But even if I didn't have that, I can always do the test. If I do have the LTE, when I'm done with my test, I can upload this data and share it with anybody instantly. So there's a lot of great features. And the reality is most people will be able to pull out their phone and do a test automatically, geolocate where I stood, time, date, stamp, perform the test per standards, and share it with my building official, my provider, anybody before I left. So we really think this is going to be more of a requirement in the future that you did verify that you did your test, where and how, and that it was done with an automated scenario. The Europeans are already all over this. They think doing a manual test is a poor way of applying the technology that's out there. So they really promote and almost some areas require the test be done automatically. So they know that there's less user error, people aren't writing down numbers by accident that are incorrect, and everything is done with software that tracks it all. So Apple version is coming out, we're hoping in about a month. So, but we do have Android that's available now, and you can also go to the Windows Store and download the Windows version. For those of you that are Android users, please let us know what kind of success you're having with this. So it's kind of an early release, and there's so many Android phones that are out there that do a variety of different things that we're looking to get feedback on what kind of phone you have and whether or not you're able to successfully use our cloud. So the only thing you do need is your gauge does need to be Wi-Fi enabled, and if you need help with those kind of connections, you can watch the webinar, or you can contact technical support how to make sure you can get the gauge and your device connected. So it's as simple as connecting, picking a type of test I want to do in a standard, and you're able to follow the prompts, connect the gauge, and run it everything automatically. So before I go into the other apps, Jay, you got any questions? I see there's a few maybe on there.
All right, let's see.
I can help with Ken's. Ken, we're working on European standards, and we're hoping to have them out early next year. Sometime next year, we're going to integrate two things: European standards and the ability to do commercial duct testing is one that's on the hit list. The other ones that are down the road are how to do a leakage to outside test with two devices. Other things we're also going to be looking at to integrate is how to incorporate the new ResNet ICC standard 380 to follow some of those prompts, how to do some of the requirements to go with other flow devices. All those is the goal for our cloud to be able to do these things automatically and confirm where you did them. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
No, no, that's actually the one I was going to mention. There was a question about do we know if a standard test uses a lot of data?
It does not. What it generates after it does its test is a very simple, almost like text document. Text is in like it's not formatted type of a text in general. So and it uploads that to the cloud when you're done. So it stores them on the cloud, and your then device will upload or update itself. And so I actually have the updated information. So and if you can't update it because you don't have internet, as soon as you do have internet, it can actually upload it. As you drive back to the shop or to your next job and it finds internet, it'll just automatically upload your information. While it's stored, it actually encrypts it so that it's not able to be altered or changed. So it's very smart about saying, sorry, you have no internet now, we can upload this as soon as you do. But it's not a large data unless you add a lot of pictures. You can add pictures as you go that get uploaded. And we're trying to figure out a way to make sure all those pictures are low data. So we don't think it's going to be a major data drain in terms of using this as an interaction. Oh, so Richard pointed out that Title 24 is not an option on the Android. So we released the Android version just to try to see how well it was functioning on the Android platform. So it did not have a fully featured version. But what I can tell you is that the next update will have Title 24, and we've integrated things with Title 24 that actually do compliance that are specific for Title 24. And we're also working on compliance standards for ResNet and ICC. So if you're doing a ResNet test that you also want to make sure is code compliant, that those things have been built in on a page that says, I need to be below 3 air changes per hour, here's the volume, and when you're done, it'll tell you whether or not you passed that requirement. So we think it's a great way for confirmed compliance for building officials and for providers. So there's some other apps that are out there that are incredibly handy. In fact, I was at a show and somebody said, I'm so glad you had this app, that for some reason he was doing something at a house and he was in the attic and somebody opened the door while he was doing a blower door test, and he was able to pull out his phone, connect to the gauge, and turn it off before it became a catastrophe. So that is a true story that I've gotten from somebody at a show, and I was pretty impressed that they were able to be savvy enough to do that. So what the gauge remote does is you can download this for Android or Apple, and it will basically connect to your gauge, provide you with a remote control basically, so I can actually not just see my gauge but actually interact with the gauge. So I can actually stop, start, change the results, see the results, press the hold. Everything I can do on the gauge I can actually do through the Gauge Remote app. The Gauge Remote app is a free download, and you can get that from the Android or the Google Play or Apple Store. There's also one that's Virtual Gauge. This has to be downloaded directly from Retrotec, and this is actually the PC app. What this allows you to do is connect my gauge to my PC and make the connections and see it on the PC, and actually also interact my mouse, or you have a touch screen, I can do the same. But on this I can actually open up more than one device. So if I'm doing a leakage outside, clearly my blower door should have been at 25, then I can actually run both gauges on my PC without having to be next to them. So this can be valuable if you have a scenario where my duct tester and my blower door are completely far away from each other. I can actually open up my PC, make Wi-Fi connections that they all have to be on the same network, and then I can actually run my leakage outside test from my PC. So it looks something like this kind of a concept. So this is leakage set to 0 or go to 0. So on the left I have my duct tester, and I can actually hit set 0, and on the other side I have my blower door, which I set to 25, and can get my results. And the reason I put a red line through that is so that you know your results are actually on the left gauge. That's actually my leakage outside results. So this is a really fun app to do things like that. In the future is our cloud can actually do this, but that's probably more than a year away, but that's where we're headed.
Yeah, and I want to mention too, one of the great things about Virtual Gauge, that's free, and that works on any PC, and you can also simulate tests, the test environment, so you can set it to pretend that it's connected to some sort of fan. And this is a fantastic tool for teaching or for learning. So teaching, I mean like teaching other people or learning it. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to spend any money. In fact, when Joe first contacted me and said, "Hey, we're going to bring you on to Retrotec," I didn't have a gauge, and I used the virtual gauge to learn how to use the gauge. So it's a really useful tool, and for a lot of different situations, not just for training on a live work site. Back to you, Joe.
Okay, that was great input, because the virtual gauge does have the simulated mode, and you can actually play with the gauge as though you're actually running something, even though you're not connected to anything. So I'll run through the last scenario, which is pretty quick, which is just some maintenance stuff. So calibration is every 5 years for the gauge. We do have a field check confirmation. There is firmware to update, so there are things you need to do to your gauge as we do to other devices that we own. So digital sensors every 5 years, very helpful. We do have a couple of webinars that cover this, but if you caught this earlier, if you want to do a field check, in fact, I recommend you do a field check every time you use your gauge, because it's so simple to do. Is you just want to take your gauge and make sure it's set to Pascal on Pascal. You can do that by tapping channel B and just hit Pascal at the top. When you come back to home, they'll both be on PA, Pascal, Pascal. And just use your yellow tube that comes with it to do that. They actually, Rich created a field check document. If you need to document your stuff for ResNet or just in general, you can download this on their website and fill in the information. And they fix the color coding, but it actually tells you what port to connect to what. And you enter the results, and it will tell you if you pass or not. And the reason that we recommend you use the red tube is because the results are using something that is a standard length to confirm that your results should be in the same range, so you know that. So if you use a really short tube, you're going to get numbers that will always pass. If you use a really long tube, it's actually hard to pass because the pressure difference is so little based upon the length of tubing. So most of the yellow tubes are around 6 feet long. They always come with your system, and that's a great way to determine if your unit is working correctly. So it looks something like that. So the firmware updates, most of the people that call and say, oh, I don't have a problem with this, or this is not working, then usually the first thing they say is, well, what is your firmware? And they're like, 2.2 something something, and they realize that they need to update their firmware. So we highly recommend that you do this regularly, and it's done automatically when you open up the configurator on your PC, that it can check and tell you if you need to do that. So on the splash screen in the beginning tells you what your firmware is. That only lasts a couple of seconds, so then the next stage is your home screen will tell you what your version is. Or you can go to the third page, and under your settings it will tell you what your version is. So it's easily found in your gauge. You can download the configurator, which is free. It has all of the things that connect your PC and the gauge together. And one of the best ways to do it is open up the configurator, have your gauge off, plug in the USB, and it usually automatically turns on your gauge. If not, turn your gauge on, and it's usually found 9 times out of 10. There's always an issue with drivers, so if that didn't work, close the configurator, unplug your gauge, and do it again by opening configurator first, and then connect your gauge. Worst case, restart your computer and try it one more time. It's rare that it doesn't connect after a restart. And again, it isn't really the gauge, it has to do with PC drivers and some of those challenges that you might have. So as it gets older, it gets smarter, like all of us, and it goes through a whole scenario. When you plug in the gauge, it says yes, you need to update, follow the prompts. It's very straightforward, and you can download this from Retrotec on their software page. You also can update your Wi-Fi, which is kind of fuzzy here. If you need to do network settings, you can do that through the configurator. You also could do any other settings if you would decide to. On tech support, this is the thing you're going to do and follow their requirements. So that's a wrap. If you're looking for more information, there's some of the stuff we talked about today. There's lots of YouTube videos that webinars that go directly kind of in those more in-depth of the details for this. And you can also see those videos online at Retrotec or YouTube. So Retrotec.com is constantly being updated. In fact, this picture is already kind of old. So if you're looking for more information or want to learn more about ArcCloud or other stuff, it's definitely the place to go. We have a dedicated person who's on top of the website and making sure the information is constantly being updated. That's a wrap. Any last questions or something we want to address, Jay?
Doesn't look like it. I think we've pretty much covered everything. There's probably quite a bit more. I'm sure that we could do probably a week's worth of some of the design and innovation that's on the outside and inside of the gauge, but I think, Joe, you did a great job. So if we don't have any more questions, then I think we can say goodbye. Thanks, and see you next week.